Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How to Transform Your Legacy Processes to Keep Up with the Digital Age. I'm Teresa Resick, Director of Webinars here at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of today's event. And with me today are Neil Ward-Dutton of MWD Advisors and Jared Newman of Saurian Software. And Saurian Software is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. And before we get started, I just want to offer a few pointers for viewing today's webinar. By joining our webinars live, you can customize your own viewing experience, so feel free to open and close or resize the different windows that are on your screen. And across the bottom of your screen is a list of all of the widgets that are available to you. You can download a PDF of the presentation at any time. Just look to the resources list. And there you'll also see links to a few other documents and web pages, and they're there to help you learn a little bit more about today's topic. So feel free to click on those at any time. They'll open up in a new browser tab for you, and you can view those and look more in depth with them after our webinar today. Feel free to ask questions throughout the hour using the Q&A feature that's on the left side of your screen. We will hold these questions until the end, where we should have about 5 or 10 minutes to answer them. But you can also use this Q&A feature for technical support or to make any comments as well. And this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIIM.org's Webinars on Demand library in just a few days. I'd like to introduce our featured speakers today. Very pleased to have both these gentlemen with us. Neil Ward-Dutton is MWD Advisors co-founder and research director, and is one of Europe's most experienced and high-profile strategic IT advisors and industry analysts. His areas of expertise include digital transformation, business process management, enterprise architecture, and IT strategy. Neil acts as an advisor to large European organizations across industries and sectors as diverse as financial services, retail, utilities, and government, as well as providing advice to a number of leading technology vendors. And also speaking with us today is Jared Newman, who is CTO of Saurian Software. Jared has over 25 years of experience working in the financial technology sector. Over this time, Jared has worked closely with many organizations to help them redesign, streamline, and automate their core business processes. Jared leads Saurian Software's product development team, and that team's responsible for designing and building applications that support organizations' current and future work management needs. So right now, I am going to turn things over to Neil Ward-Dutton to begin our conversation today about transforming your processes. Neil?
Thanks very much for the intro, Teresa. It's a real pleasure to be here, yeah, I'd like to welcome you all warmly to this webinar. So the title of this presentation is How to Transform Your Legacy Processes to Keep Up with the Digital Age. And so I'm going to kind of tackle both those pieces, and I'm going to tackle them in reverse order. So first of all, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking about what this idea of the digital age actually means, and I promise I'm not going to talk about Uber or Airbnb. I'm going to talk much more concretely about what it actually means to operate in today's market when we have so much change, and then talk about the implications for business processes and the kinds of investments and capabilities that you should really be looking at if you want to try and bring all this together, because it's not as straightforward as it might seem. So let's get started. So let's start by talking about the digital age. And I'm not going to talk in huge detail at every one of the points on this slide. Really, the point of this slide is to show you that this is kind of multidimensional. How digital technology is changing markets, it's not just about new customer expectations, although that's very often what people fixate on. Nevertheless, I mean, that is probably the top group of concerns that people have, and it's absolutely the case that customers and citizens have greater expectations of our ability to deliver service in a timely fashion across multiple channels than they've ever done before, and it's only getting those expectations are only getting more challenging to deal with. But there's more to it than that. Actually, it's about new competitors. Whether you're in financial services, or maybe you're in retail, or you're a utility, or you're in travel and transport, hospitality. All of these sectors are being disrupted to a degree. We also have a changing risk landscape, and it's really important that we don't forget about that. Often, issues around risk management are kind of thought of as a something for somebody else to deal with. We've got people, like driving innovation, creating new capabilities, doing all the cool stuff, and worrying about risk is somebody else's problem. And I would contend that actually a truly strategic view on all this needs to really consider risk angles as well. And those people need to be at the table right from the start, actually. There's no point in leaving that to somebody else to think about. So we really need to consider all of these different perspectives together as an integrated whole. And the last category is changing stakeholder expectations, and that could be regulators, industry regulators often, but could also be other kinds of governance bodies, your board, for example. There are absolutely greater and greater requirements put on all of us to show that we have a sustainable way of doing business and serving people, that we are transparent, and that decisions are made in an appropriate way. All of these things are, in a sense, all parts of one core thing. There are different perspectives on the same thing. Now, when we look just at financial services as an example, this is illustrative because I think this is kind of the center of a tornado. There's stuff going on, as I've already said, across many sectors, but particularly keenly felt in the financial services sector at the moment. So it's a good illustration. Now, what I'm showing here, and this is the graphic on the left here, is not ours. It's actually something I've taken from a great company that's very specialized in the investment sector called CB Insights. You might want to check them out if you're really interested in the world of venture capital. This is showing how an established kind of high street financial services institution is being attacked. So in the middle, you've got a screenshot of a HSBC webpage, and they are just an example. But what that then shows is how there's dozens of small digital native startups here nibbling away at the business model of a big bank like HSBC. So, whether this is to do with current accounts or credit cards or foreign exchange or mortgages, all of these things are being attacked. So it's kind of, these guys are trying to react against kind of potential death by 1,000 cuts. So we've got, on the left, we've got lots of very nimble, very small, but fast-growing digital startups. And then on the right, we've also got other challenges. We've got what we'll call challenger banks. So other sort of mainstream banking institutions now coming into the marketplace to with a fairly kind of well-understood business model, but again, coming in and attacking the big established players. And then you've got out-of-sector players as well. And I've included here supermarkets and other retail groups now offering far more than just credit facilities, but actually offering current accounts, mortgages, insurance, whole portfolios of consumer financial services. So if we just look at financial services, you've seen disruption from net new kind of digital native players with no legacy. You're seeing new players with traditional business models coming in and competing as well. And you're seeing people competing from out of sector. And this pattern is repeated. So this is an illustration of financial services, but we see this kind of pattern in many, many places. And obviously it creates huge challenges. The common response is to think purely about how can we leverage digital technology, principally to drive customer experience improvements. The common conversation that we end up having with clients is we know we can't compete only on price. We know we can't compete only on product. So how can we deliver a better experience for our customers? And this is also felt in government as well, although clearly it's not about competing on price or product. Nevertheless, there is a strong desire to compete, or not to compete, but to deliver superior experiences to citizens. And that's fine, but this is just one part of the picture. Here's another place where I'm showing you multiple different perspectives on what in quotes, digital actually means. As I said, a lot of people fixate on the view about, which is about engagement and experiences, and that's fine. But actually, our analysis is that digital, the real power of digital, is actually about how it enables organizations to more efficiently coordinate resources. Okay, and I need to kind of let that stew with you for a bit, because it's a bit of a different way of looking at things. But what I'm showing here on this chart is a quadrant where essentially in each different part of the picture, we're looking at different kinds of resources. So on the left-hand side is a set of considerations about digital, which is really about internal resources, resources inside your organization. And on the right is a set of concerns that are mostly about external resources, or resources that are kind of in the market, in your customer community, your citizen community. You don't control those resources. At the top is resources that are primarily about people and knowledge. And at the bottom is a set of resources that are mainly about processes and things. Now, when you talk to marketing people and sales people and some service people, they are looking at the orange box. So you talk to them about digital, they're talking about external engagement and experiences. When you talk to HR people or communications professionals, internal comms people, they're talking about the green box. They will talk about digital, but they're really talking about how digital technologies change employee engagement. When you talk to COOs, they're talking about how we automate and improve operations. And when you talk to strategy people or people in an office of a CTO, for example, they are probably talking about the red box. They are all essentially looking at different parts of the picture. The really important part to realize is that IT's core value in this world is showing how all of these things have to actually be knitted together. So every different group that we speak to has a different perspective, but it's only by actually linking those perspectives up through technology that we can actually create true transformation. I have to kind of let that sit with you for a minute. This is really, really important, and it's not something that's immediately obvious to a lot of people. So what does that actually mean? What does it mean to try and link these different domains, these different kind of models of thinking together? What do we actually need to do? Well, it's really about what someone from a very large multinational, I think, beautifully succinctly said to me. What they're doing is they're trying to weave a digital thread through their organization. So if you think back to that previous slide, we had the 4 quadrants and links between them. What the way to make this happen is to find a way to build a platform that enables you to weave a thread through those 4 different domains, join them all up. And this is a different way of looking at the world today, the picture you've got in front of you. And this shows how, it's a bit of a cartoon, but it shows how actually in our research across multiple different sectors, we see organizations really, really wanting to create better experiences. That's the kind of view on the right. They're trying to create better experiences for customers that are integrated across venues, platforms, channels, and so on. So it's a seamless experience. It's seamless delivery of information and service. Now, the challenge for most incumbent or large organizations is they've actually spent 15 years going in completely the opposite direction. So they're trying to create more integrated experiences, but their operations are actually dispersed. So they spent 15 years offshoring, outsourcing, creating shared services centers, maybe doing some captive service delivery, working more with dispersed groups of partners and suppliers, and trying to orchestrate all that. Now, the challenge is when you spent 15 years essentially dispersing your operations around, how do you, on the other hand, create integrated experiences? And this is really the crunch, right? Because if you think about that orange box again, the box that is all about how do we use digital technology to create better experiences, fundamentally, what people are talking about there is we want to make better promises to our customers, our prospects, our citizens. Well, that's fine if you want to make better promises, but you know what? Unless you can actually deliver on those promises, you could argue that you're actually going to end up in a worse situation than you were in the first place. So it's fine to focus on the front end of the experience. How do we make a better promise? But unless we can link that through all those different domains, including to operations which are probably quite dispersed, maybe siloed, certainly, run in different ways, maybe across different product lines, different business lines. It's not an easy thing to do, and this is, as I said, the crunch. So what we want to do is try and weave this digital thread. And what this thread is really about is a platform that allows you to share knowledge, coordinate work, make decisions effectively in a way that links up your front office to your back office and out through your supply chain, and does that consistently at scale so that you don't drop the ball. And that's not trivial. So you need to really think big about this. I don't mean you need to invest big. Absolutely not necessarily, certainly not at the start. But you need to think about the overall kind of value chain and where you sit within that and how you participate in your community. You have to have that big picture to start with, because it's only then that you realize the capabilities you really need to bring to bear on the situation. All right. Now, the other thing that many large organizations have to deal with is that we have a corporate knowledge issue. On the left-hand side, you can see, and I apologize because this is actually a chart taken from North America, and you may be watching this or interested in this from a European perspective, but you have to take my word for it that this kind of pattern is repeated. If you look at the S&P 500, which is the index of the top 500 companies in the US, and you look in aggregate at how they value themselves, so you look at all their financial statements and you add them all up essentially, you look at how they value themselves in terms of tangible assets, so that's kind of stuff, that's buildings, vehicles, goods, material, all of those physical things. And then you look at how they value themselves in terms of intangible assets, that's things like knowledge, intellectual property. You can see there's been a massive shift between the 1970s and today. So whereas it's pretty much flipped. In the 1970s, around about 15-20% of corporate value in an established market like the US was essentially intangible. And the vast majority was the value was based on physical things that companies owned, and now it's really flipped. So the value in aggregate that we're seeing is much less about what you own, and it's much more about what you know. And in fact, if you look at many large organizations, they're trying to get out of the owning things business, because owning things is really tough. The margins are bad, operations are really challenging. It's actually there's far more potential in being essentially a knowledge business. But at the same time, we have a big challenge, because in many, many situations, we have many roles where there's a very high turnover of staff. And curiously, when you think about it, many of those roles where we have the high turnover is actually those roles that touch the customer or touch the citizen. And so if we go back to a version of the previous chart where we had the need to create integrated experiences, but the tension then with these dispersed operations, and then we superimpose on that where those high turnover roles are. They're all pretty much at the front edge. So we want to create better experiences. We want to create integrated experiences. We want to bring the full capability of the enterprise to that point of the experience and the moment of truth with the customer or with the citizen. But we have a workforce where there may be quite high turnover. How do we create an environment where we can really bring new people in? Maybe we can reduce turnover. We can essentially take corporate knowledge and make it available to people in the right way in the moment, so that everybody, regardless of how new they might be to the organization, everybody has the potential to deliver a great experience. Again, we come back to that digital thread. It's about creating a platform where we can share knowledge, coordinate work at scale, do that from the front office to the back office. Now, the slight wrinkle here is because the kind of technology that we're talking about in abstract at some level has been around for a while, right? We talk about business process management technology. At a high level, that category of technology really fits the bill. However, when we look at how historically many organizations have used BPM technology, they've tended to focus very much on process efficiency and quality. So that's the left-hand side of this table. So they've tended to use the ability to coordinate work and share knowledge, and use that in a very structured way. And so when we look at how we use knowledge of processes to drive a system, we tended to have a view where exceptions to a kind of codified process are kind of things that we're afraid of. We don't like exceptions. We want to kind of engineer those out. We want to try and make the process always follow the same path every time. We also find organizations pursuing that kind of role, very often they can fall into a mode of thinking where actually any change to the process is something that we want to try and control as far as possible. And actually, anytime we look at potentially making a change, we have to rigorously test everything. And again, it's all about efficiency, it's about quality, it's about the happy path, it's about going in a straight line. And that works actually for some processes where you have very, very predictable paths, where you know exactly what the processes you need to follow to get to the outcome you want. That's fine. But we are talking here about essentially processes that support the right kind of customer interaction. And we all know, as individuals, empirically, we know how frustrating it is when we work with an organization. We want to solve a problem, we want to make an order, we want to change something, when they make us jump through hoops and they make us conform to a process that is set in stone, right? I hate it, and I know many other people who hate it. The last thing that we want to be doing, if we're really interested in creating great customer experiences, the last thing we should be doing is forcing anybody into a kind of straight line process which cannot deviate from a given path. So actually, if you want to use this kind of technology to drive customer experience excellence, you need a very different kind of posture, which actually flips this whole thing on its head, where actually we should be embracing exceptions. We should be using and building platforms that enable our people to be creative in their support of the customer's journey. And we should be engineering in flexibility so that actually we have the capability to share knowledge, coordinate work at scale. But what we're not doing is saying we always have to follow the same path. Actually, what we're looking for here is technology that allows people to be more creative within constraints. Fundamentally, this is about a different way of thinking about processes and outcomes. On the left, on this picture here, is the classic kind of approach to process improvement and BPM, where essentially the center of the universe is this idea of a process model. And then information to support the process kind of sits underneath, and people sit around the process. The process is king. What we're really looking at here in the context of the presentation today and the capabilities that I'm hoping that you're going to be looking at building is really about kind of turning that inside out. And instead what we end up with is a more goal-driven system where actually it's the goal, the outcome we want for the customer, and the supporting knowledge to enable us to reach that goal, which is at the center. And then what sits around that is the ability to collaborate and leverage our expertise and scale our expertise. And then it's tasks and bits of processes that are actually sitting in underneath and plugging into the system. So if you like, we've kind of flipped, we've turned this inside out, and it's the goal and the information that we're capturing and working with at the center, and it's tasks and process fragments that actually come in around the side, and a collaborative environment really tying it all together. And in the work we do, we talk about three different kinds of work. And we're really here talking about the right-hand side. So classically, people have used this technology to look at how can we automate work? How can we just process things straight through? You know, that in the financial services world, that's things like clearing. There's sort of aspects of trading. There's lots of things where we just want volume, we want speed, and we want to get people out of the equation as far as humanly possible. That works for some kinds of work. And then we have transactional work, which typically is kind of service work, where we are dealing with individual kinds of business needs or business transactions, such as, for example, change my address. You kind of know what needs to be done. You know there's a very clear set of steps that need to be gone through. And actually, although you can't take people out of that picture completely, or very, very rarely can you do that, you know that by engineering a fairly strict process, you can get to an outcome very quickly. You can serve that transaction in a cost-effective way. This kind of work we're talking about, though, is much more about exploration. It's about having a goal, knowing we need to address something for somebody, and then having essentially a toolkit at our disposal. So as an information worker, as a knowledge worker, as a service person, having a toolkit at my disposal so I can get the right knowledge into this situation. I can bring transactions and processes and tasks into that. I can bring my colleagues into that as well. And here the value of the platform is not necessarily about pure performance. It's certainly not about straight-through processing. It's actually more about how do we audit and understand the quality of the work so that we can make everybody as good as the best person. How do we drive collaboration and integration through our business in this work? And how do we enable knowledge to scale so that people who really know about a certain subject can scale that knowledge across teams and organizations? So there's real value in the platform that you use to support this kind of exploratory work, but it's not necessarily the same kind of value as you would look at if you were trying to drive work in an automated fashion. So just to try and kind of net it all out, digital technology has the potential and is transforming organizations. But in order to really do this in what I would say is a truly strategic way, you can't just think about the front edge of your organization and how you interact with customers. That's about making better promises, and that's fine. But unless you can weave a digital thread through your organization, you can build a platform, deliver a capability that enables you to coordinate work, share knowledge at scale, then you're going to be in serious trouble. When you look at the kinds of capabilities you need from a platform there, it's not really about supporting the really automated work that we may have already looked at in the past with BPM. We need some of the same kinds of tools and capabilities that people are familiar with, if they're familiar with BPM technology, but we need to look for tools and capabilities that allow a more exploratory approach to work, more creativity in the front office, if you like. So instead of making everybody follow a strict process, we essentially end up with the ability to collaborate around a goal and bring information, bring knowledge, bring processes, bring tasks to the picture to solve that issue for the individual as it needs to be done. So this is really about coordinating work around among experts to resolve challenges. Okay, it's not about enforcing standard procedures everywhere. It's about enabling people to use discretion, but still work within kind of guide rails or according to controls and policies. It's about having the ability to manage documents and knowledge as first-class citizens. It's about being able to bring reusable components into the system. And it's about being able to manage the work and do the work in one space, rather than having those things as two separate things. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. As you look at work in your organization, and maybe you look for opportunities to improve how people get work done and serve customers, serve citizens, the time is really ripe for taking a step back, because actually digital technology, whether you're thinking about big data analytics, bots, cloud, mobile, social, when you think about in aggregate those technologies, they really do enable you potentially to completely rethink how work gets done. You know, what work gets done, who does the work, when do they do it, where do they do it, and why and how do they do it? All of those questions, you know, historically we've had fixed answers to those things. And this digital technology revolution actually enables us to fundamentally perhaps rethink one or more of these questions. So I encourage you to really take a step back if you can and think more holistically about the work you get done. Are there new ways that work can actually be done by people and systems working together? So very last thing I'll leave you with is just to say that my organization can potentially support you if you are looking at this area, if you're looking to kind of take business processes further forward to support a digital transformation. We have a set of services that can potentially help you all the way through just making sure that you're in the right place, you're getting started, you have the right skills, to understanding the technology landscape and then developing a capability. And I'll just point you to that URL at the bottom. If you want to find out more about how we can help, just give us a shout. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Neil. I'd like to continue really on this topic of how the digital era has changed customers' expectation and how it challenges organizations to respond to this change, particularly from a process perspective. So if we look back at the early days of business process management, a key focus for most businesses was making their core processes more efficient, more effective and less costly. So many of the approaches to this came from the production lines of car manufacturers who were seen to be models of efficiency. So with this as a reference point, much of the focus for business process design has been based on making processes more predictable through redesign and standardization, by making them automated by eliminating manual tasks, particularly around the areas of user integration, and making them more measurable so that managers can see how the people and processes are performing, particularly from a quality perspective, and also centralizing control so that stakeholders can ensure that everything is being done as has been agreed was the key objective. So in many cases, this approach delivered impressive cost savings through the elimination of waste, as well as service improvements through having joined up processes that were more focused on the customer. However, with the rapid rate of change brought about by the digital era, this approach is struggling to provide the flexibility that organizations need to change and adapt in a fast-moving environment. So when we're out talking to our customers, we're talking to operation managers, particularly in the financial services sector, and we find ourselves talking to them about the struggles that they actually face. So one of the things that they struggle with is their structured processes, particularly those ones that have been codified into a BPM solution. They no longer reflect the actual business requirements. These defined processes are often outdated and inflexible and too prescriptive, and any attempt to change them takes too long and is too costly. So as a result, the business teams have introduced their own workarounds to allow them to get the job done and deliver for their customer. So we see again the rise of end-user computing with spreadsheets to the fore, but also a whole range of consumer applications such as things like Dropbox are coming into the workplace to allow teams to overcome some of the problems that they face. So we also talk to operations teams and find them under pressure, particularly with team supervisors looking for more multi-skilled team members who can get the job done with less handoffs. So we see shifts and rotas being introduced to provide longer hours of service in conjunction with people working from remote locations outside of the processing centre. We also see overlap of the line between the traditional back and front office operations, with everyone having to communicate directly with the customer through a variety of different channels. This is all happening dynamically, and teams are having to respond to what is in front of them now rather than planning for the future based on historical reporting. So the work being done has also changed considerably. If we take work patterns, for example, many back office operations continue to organize themselves based on batches of work arriving once or twice a day. This, of course, is based on historical postal delivery patterns, whereas in reality, work continuously arrives through digital channels. So this challenges the traditional approach of organizing work at the beginning of the day, doling it out to the team members, and then reviewing progress in the afternoon. I also think the complexity of the work actually being done has changed, and in many cases simplified. So more of the work is task-based, involving one-and-done type activities rather than long-running complex procedures. These still exist, and they need to exist, but they seem to be less prevalent. So finally, I think a key challenge is around the area of customer expectations. So customers' expectations of response times have also changed considerably. Customers expect, I think, conversational type interactions with the service teams and not stop-start interactions with multi-day response times. Customers want to be involved in the process and not just informed when something goes wrong. So, for example, we see customers photographing documents, signing contracts electronically, approving requests with their fingerprints, all in real time, without the traditional timeouts that many back-office processes have been designed to rely on. So fundamentally, most customers have digital technology always available to them, and they have the smarts and the desire to use it. So how do organizations respond to these challenges? Well, Neil's talked about the blurring lines between employee engagement, operations, customer engagement, and product strategies. So I think drilling down from this, Neil spoke about organizing work around goals and not processes. And I think this succinctly sums up the shift in mindset that we see in some of the organizations we work with. Specifically, many of the operations managers and COOs that we talk to are looking for new ideas, new principles even, to reorganize and remotivate their operational teams. So some of the topics that we talk to them about are things like having more collaborative teams with people working together with a common goal of delivering for the customer rather than people focused on the process over the outcome. With this collaborative approach, the team becomes more self-managing and the role of the supervisor changes to that of a mentor, someone who enables the team by providing them with the information and guidance they need whilst removing any barriers to the team achieving its goal. So flexible teams are another topic we also talk about, where people, processes and systems are capable of responding to changing requirements to ensure that they can get the job done. So the team should be able to organize themselves, for example, maybe drafting in temporary team members or deciding to work different hours or from different locations. Also, the processes need to be flexible and open to change as the team deals with customers through different channels with different requirements. And finally, this flexibility must be supported by the applications that the team use, and the team must have a much higher degree of control and ownership of these applications. As Neil put it, flexibility needs to be engineered in. So independent teams are also discussed, and the idea here really is that teams should have the skills within the team to do the work and should not be relying on multiple handoffs to other teams to complete a task. Eliminating these handoffs is key to increasing customer satisfaction, improving response time, and of course reducing customer frustration. Independent teams also have the ability to innovate within the team, and I think this is really key. Not only should they be able to come up with ideas, they should be able to implement them, review them, and tweak them as they move towards their optimum way of working. So teams ultimately should have more responsibility for their own operation. They need to be given the room to become more self-managing and self-organizing, and they need to be given the tools to support this. But ultimately, I suppose, it's really about more ownership of how they actually do the work and how they deliver for their customer. So this means loosening up on the command and control structures that exist in many processing centers today and providing access to the information the team needs so they can measure their own performance and make informed decisions. So these concepts are not exactly new. They've been successfully applied in software engineering teams over the past decade, and the agility that they bring has led to dramatic improvements in innovation, software quality, and the pace at which changes are made. Having seen the success within software teams, many organizations are looking to see how they can bring these concepts into their operation centers. Now, these concepts, as Neil said, can be difficult to grasp and even harder to implement, given the structures, processes, and systems that are already in place. But large organizations such as ING, Santander, and Unilever have embraced these concepts and have worked to bring them into their operational areas so that they can move away from centralized command and control structures and become more responsive to their customers and markets. So it's also a topic that AIIM and the Harvard Business Review have been active in exploring and advising on, particularly around the area of agile techniques and how they can be brought outside the IT department. There's other commentators on the subject as well, people like Jacob Morgan. He covers the topic in a more wide-ranging area with his blogs, books, and podcasts under the Future of Work banner. So Neil touched around things like standardization and regulation. So we do a lot of work with regulated organizations, and compliance and regulation would often be a concern for COOs as they learn about and consider agile techniques. I mean, it's a valid concern, but I don't think it should be used as a barrier to actually make a change or to an excuse to do nothing. I think instead the skills that staff members have and the tools and techniques that they use should have compliance and regulation at their core, in the same way that quality is. And finally, a word on the people who work in these teams. As more people who have grown up in the digital era join these operational teams, it's just alien to them to be using rigid, inflexible systems and processes where they've no influence over how work is done. And as a result, organizations will need to adapt and change in order to attract and retain talent. So we've quite a bit of experience in Saurian designing, building and deploying processes and their supporting applications. And we believe that agility is the next step forward in the evolution of process. So we also believe that the next generation of applications will support the team and how they approach their work, rather than prescribing how it is to be done. So I'd like to run through some of the characteristics of these apps that we think will be key. So to allow the team act based on what is in front of them, they need to be able to see what is in front of them. Therefore, applications that provide teams with clear, relevant and actionable information that is up to date in real time. This will provide information about the past, so trends can be discovered, which will in turn will influence the team's view of the near future, and they will also be able to plan how they are going to deal with that. So we also spoke about teams becoming more self-managing and self-organizing, so the applications they use need to support this. Work management applications will allow the team leader easily define the team, add new members, adjust their skills, determine availability, etc., as frequently as they need to do this. They should also make it easy for the team leaders to see what work needs to be done and to determine the best way of getting it done. This means that the workload should be easily visible in a priority order. Because the applications play a supporting role, they should be flexible enough to allow each team to define what they want to automate and when they want to automate it. So standards should be built in as much as possible, while exceptions should be identified so they can be dealt with. Another area for automation is the whole area of decision-making around who gets what work, when and where. So we also spoke about ownership and responsibility. I think the teams need the freedom to observe what is going on around them so that they can decide what they need to do and then act. This is something that's happening all the time, and the applications need to be able to allow the team to act on their decisions with the confidence that they can try different approaches without impacting other parts of the business. They need to be able to do this without the drawn-out, specified design, test, implement cycle that hampers change in most organizations. So just a few words then on how we think organizations will acquire this next generation of applications. We think that applications need to be consumer grade in that they are intuitive and simple. They don't need rafts of functionality as was introduced into many BPM products. They just need the basic tools to get the job done. We've seen how the most widely adopted consumer applications are often the simplest. We need to learn from this. The applications will also need to be portable, running on any device, and accessible, allowing people to use them wherever needed. And I include the customer in this. The applications should extend beyond the organization's boundaries. Based on what is happening generally in the business application space, we do not think that these future solutions will be as proprietary and as customized as those that exist today. In line with other trends, we see them being made up of small, specialized components which are bolted together using standard REST-based APIs. This will allow organizations to configure and build solutions to their requirements using standard components that can be easily swapped in and out. I suppose in some cases, we see these solutions being put together by system integrators, but we also see many organizations who we're talking to today getting their internal IT team to take responsibility for this initiative and allowing those teams move from being innovators as well as being operators. So finally, we think that work management applications of the future will be integrated with the whole fabric of business applications available today, both legacy and non-legacy. We recognize that organizations have a large investment in existing BPM-based solutions and that they need to be able to enhance these rather than replace them. We believe that going forward, businesses will have a choice as to which components they use, and they will no longer be dictated to by organizational decisions to commit to a platform. We believe that the most, if not all, of these applications will be cloud-based and that they'll be easy to get up and running in any business team as they become more self-learning. So just a little bit about Saurian. We're a specialized company focused on using software to help organizations rethink their processes. Over the years, we've deployed hundreds of solutions in core functional areas in financial institutions across Europe. Our current focus is on the future of work management, and we're investing in creating a new suite of applications to support operational teams as they transition to the digital workplace. This isn't a journey we undertake by ourselves, And we love to hear from people who are facing some of the challenges that we discussed today. If you'd like to be part of this discussion, please drop me an email or contact me via LinkedIn. So this concludes my thoughts on the topic. I'd like to hand back to Teresa now for questions. Thank you.
Certainly. Thank you. We've just been listening to Jared Newman of Saurian Software, and before that we were listening to Neil Ward-Dutton of MWD Advisors. And this has been a fantastic and very fascinating conversation listening to everything that both of you have been sharing. Just want to remind people that that in the resource list to the right of the slide area, that there's some additional resources, not only that for what Jared and Neil have contributed, there's also a few other things there from AIIM as well. So encourage you to click on those links and check those out as well. And just want to ask start asking some of the questions that have been coming in. And Jared, I'd like to start with you with this first one. And someone's just asking about what are some of the barriers and bottlenecks. I know that's traditional wording. We're talking about bottlenecks, but for adopting this agile approach and managing work. How are some different ways that you've seen some of your customers take with resetting that mindset to become more agile?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's from our perspective, that would be a common question we'd be asked, and also a discussion point with our customers. And I think when you look at it from the outset, it seems like there's a lot of barriers in the way. You've got things like management buy-in, the existing systems that are in place, the culture of the organization, all those kind of things. So I think that a lot of the time, a major barrier though is about understanding what an agile approach actually is. So I mean, if we go back to what's happened in the software industry, the approach in the software development industry is well documented and very well defined. There's lots of books written on the subject. It's less so in other business areas. So I think it's important to understand that, just like happened in the software development industry, each company has different implementations of agile approaches. It's not about one size fitting all. I think it's about understanding the core ideas and applying them to your own situation. And I think if you can develop the understanding of this and educate the people in an organization, it makes it much easier to get buy-in and to start something actually happening and to start doing things. And I think that's one of the key words, about starting to do something rather than continually looking at it and trying to understand what you might do. It's good to actually make a start.
Neil, Jared mentioned getting management buy-in, and that's one of the things that you had also mentioned in there, and I always see that with any new initiative or just different projects that we do in the business, you always need a champion and to pull a team together to help work on this. Can you discuss some ways that you've helped organizations to find the right champion and to get that management buy-in and get the right teams in place to work on these projects, but just to excite others in the organization for going down this new way of looking at improving the processes? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the problem is that's one of those "it depends" questions. And the truth is, it's really very dependent on the way that your organization is set up and who's on the hook. But often the starting point for this kind of exercise is somebody who is on the hook for the customer experience. So now that's not always a marketing person. Actually, in some organizations, it may be led more by customer services. Rarely, but sometimes it's led by sales. But the key is to first find the person who's on the hook for that. And then in our experience, I think that it's fair to say that the way to kind of bring this to life is to use that argument about making promises and fulfilling promises. Completely naturally, people tend to think first about the front end, the bit where your organization meets your marketplace, and look at things like mobile apps or new websites, more dynamic systems, and so on. But the argument that seems to work pretty well in many cases is that's fine. It's fine to be making these new kinds of promises about timeliness, accuracy, flexibility, presence across multiple channels, all that kind of good stuff. But we can only fulfill those promises really if we create a real chain of knowledge and empowerment that crosses through the organization, because chain is only strong as its weakest link, and it's only by actually putting platforms in place that can join the dots that we're actually going to be able to fulfill these promises. And that seems to very often get people thinking in a slightly broader way about where they're going, and that's then a good opener towards thinking about these kinds of investments.
And Jared, what are some ways that you've worked with organizations to help them get the right people in place to work on these projects?
Well, I think a lot of the time you're looking for people in the organization who are subject matter experts, and generally they're easily found. So what you're trying to do really is take those people and introduce them to a new way of thinking and a new set of skills. So a lot of the time that's about educating them, explaining to them what other organizations have done, and helping them start a journey where they start to think about things in a, I suppose, maybe more integrated way, and also in a more flexible way. I think a core thing that many of the organizations, and some of the ones I mentioned there, have found is that as they try to move towards people working a different way and being more agile and flexible, that it was essential to put in place a coach to actually mentor them, somebody who'd been there, done that before, and could help teams actually change and start to move towards this new way of thinking. So I think they're kind of maybe some of the key lessons that we would have learned and we would have seen in action as some of our clients move towards a more agile approach.
Neil, someone's asking a question here. A lot of what you've talked about with the flexibility of what we need to be looking for in organizations, and the flexibility within BPM itself to be doing these things. But someone's asking, how does this relate to case management? I know that there's a lot of overlap in the two topics with BPM and case management, and we've talked a lot of the principles that I know that are involved in both. Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Okay. So this is kind of probably a whole hour in itself, and I'll try and keep it brief. I think the challenge is really one of nomenclature. So the case management space is a very crowded and confusing space. And some technology providers who provide technology and call it case management are playing in this space, and they're doing some good things. There are some people, and I'm not denigrating them, I'm not putting them down, but there are some people who say, yeah, we have case management technology, who actually aren't doing this at all. And they have a kind of legitimate perspective, but it's not the same. And the challenge that, unfortunately, I suppose, hopefully I'm not part of the problem, but I think the industry has created a problem for itself by not being specific about what case management is, what's kind of in and what's out. And so you have companies who essentially are providing trouble ticketing systems who say they're doing case management. You have people who are really actually have classical BPM systems, but they have the ability to engineer some flexibility into the process model, who say they're doing case management. And you have others who are coming at it much more from a collaboration perspective or a task management perspective, who say they do case management. And they all do bits of it, but actually it's kind of a confusing space. And so, and it's a bit of I hope it's not a cop-out answer. So the kind of thing we're talking about here is the kind of thing that some of the things that are called case management actually can contribute towards. I think what Saurian has also plays very well into this. The challenge with the broader kind of case management idea is that when you scratch at the surface, you see there's a whole kind of zoo of different technologies and approaches which are only kind of partially addressing this whole problem space.
And Jared, so my follow-up question to you on this is certainly from Saurian Software's perspective, but just with how you're working with BPM in general, don't you already see the flexibility in there to be accomplishing all of this or a lot of this?
Well, I think that We've worked a lot with various BPM toolkits, and I think, the promise of the flexibility is there, but I think a lot of the time, it hasn't necessarily been delivered on, and I think that it is to a certain extent about a mindset as well. And as Neil said at the start, like organizations trying to drive out any variations from standard processes, and they've used BPM to actually do this. So as a result of that, BPM tool sets, where they are used, often implement quite rigid processes. Also, the way they've been implemented, a lot of it has been kind of IT driven, and they've heavily integrated those solutions into their existing line of business systems. And unfortunately, this means that everything's kind of baked in, so that the flexibility that you might want to be able to change your processes or change your approach simply isn't there. It becomes an IT project where you have to get IT buy-in, budget, etc., and it all takes time. So I think BPM has some of the flexibility needed, but I think kind of in the future there'll be smaller components and smaller products which teams will own more that'll deliver for them.
So just hearing what you're saying there, it's very much what Neil was sharing earlier, just looking at the goals as opposed to the individual processes, and just looking at the organization just from a whole new perspective and almost from a whole new set of eyes, and just a way to bring that new success to this.
I think so, yeah.
Just one of the other, yeah. And also, Jared, you had mentioned Jacob Morgan. As both of you were speaking, I was thinking of Jacob as you were talking about his future of work, because he was a keynote speaker at the recent AIM conference. And so I had the pleasure of listening to him for a little bit. And so it's, his information is very good to hear. Speaking of conferences, just also want to mention that in London, coming up on June 22nd, AIM is going to bring you the AIM UK Forum. And from AIM, our Chief Evangelist, John Mancini, and our SVP, Atla Shecklin, will be there. And they're going to be two of the keynote speakers at this forum. It is a free, independent event, and it will deliver thought leadership, and it's also going to offer some insights and expert advice through this one-day program. And it is educational seminars. It will also showcase some of the latest information management innovations. So check out this UK Forum. It's just coming up, as I look at my calendar, next Wednesday, the 22nd. It is in London. So, and there's a link to that in the resources list as well. Just also want to mention to you that AIM offers a variety of different training, and we offer one specifically on BPM. And so go to our website and check it out, AIM's training program. There's a variety of different ways that we offer this, online, in person. We offer classes throughout Europe, and or else we can make arrangements with your organizations to come to your company for a private session. So there's a lot of different ways to take advantage of this education. We have some deep dives, and we also have some quick study courses on this very valuable topic with BPM. And so it's I encourage you just to learn more as just a way to help you as you think and shape the way that you want to incorporate this more into your organization. Just as we are coming to the end of our webinar hour, just want to remind you that this webinar has been recorded, and it will be available in the next day or two to the AIM website. And also just don't forget to download the resources that we have for you. When the webinar is over with, a brief survey is going to open up on your desktop, and I highly value your feedback and would like to hear from you. So I'd appreciate it if you would just take a few minutes to take that survey and let us know how we did today, and also just suggest future topics for us. I want to thank our underwriter, Saurian Software, and without the support from our solution providers, AIM wouldn't be able to provide you with these free educational programs. So thank you, Saurian, for your support. And as we do bring this webinar to a close, I just want to leave you with the closing thoughts from both of our speakers. And I'd like to start first with Jared Newman of Saurian Software. Your closing thoughts today.
Sure. Well, I think that the future processes in terms of the work to be done, how it is done, where it is done, and who does it, and that whole topic, that it's going to gather more and more attention and momentum as organizations look for approaches to allow them to embrace the digital era. So I think there's lots of room for innovation in this space, and I think it's going to be an exciting few years ahead of us.
Thank you, Jared. And Neil Ward-Dutton of MWD Advisors, your closing thoughts today.
Well, you know what, Jared just stole my best line. So no, I'd really, I'd echo what he said. Certainly we see lots of organizations really quite aggressively pursuing automation of work. And a lot of people were worried about that. But actually, like Jared, actually, there are actually very significant opportunities for kind of raising the bar, if you like. And yes, automating some work, but actually enabling people to do much more value-adding work by using the right kinds of platforms. And so if you think about how work's being automated more, the kind of platforms we need to really raise the bar on the stuff that people do need to be much more open, modular, flexible, and allow that kind of discretion in the way that work gets done. So we are in a really exciting time, and lots of change happening. So I'm delighted to have been part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. And again, thank you, Saurian Software. And that's it for today. Thank you very much for joining us. For AIIM, this is Teresa Resick, and we will see you next time. And have a good afternoon.